Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Politdigm channel. My name is Red, and today we're back with another episode of Politdigm Reads. And specifically, today we are here to film, or, well, not film. I am here to film. You're here to listen to the last episode of Politdigm Reads Technofeudalism, or in this case, not really reading it, but rather just talking about it. With the last series that we did, where I read the Communist Manifesto, I decided to do a last episode where I basically went through and talked about what I thought of the book, what I interpreted with the book, interpreted with the book, etc. And I decided to do the same with this one, and I just kind of wanted to make an episode kind of talking about the general idea, what I thought, and also kind of, putting forth to you, the listener, what you have thought of the series. This series has, in comparison to everything else we've done so far on Politdigm, it's been our most successful series. And we've gained a ton of subscribers, a ton of viewers. So I'm sure that a lot of people enjoyed it. And of course, I would also like to know what you thought of the book and what you think of what Yanis is talking about. However, before I do start talking about all that stuff, I of course have to tell you that if you enjoy this video and enjoy our content in general and would like to support us, make sure to do so over at Patreon. If you would like to support us and want to do it in non-monetary ways, you can always check out our website. The link is in the description below. And there you can find out how you can support us in non-monetary ways, like helping us with editing and other stuff like that. Also, if you so happen to support us on Patreon, and you also so happen to have joined our public Discord server, don't forget that you can submit questions for our weekly podcast. At the end of each episode of our podcast, we host a little Q&A, and we will answer your questions on the episode. So you can, talk to us and put forth ideas regarding politics or whatever else. It can be about us personally, even can be whatever you want. And other than that, also don't forget to follow us on our social media platforms so that you can, keep up to date with the latest Politdigm news and make sure that, for example, what the next book we're going to read, or if there's some sort of emergency and we have to cancel an episode, whatever it may be, we will keep everybody updated on our social media platforms. So make sure to go check that out. And with that being said, we can actually get started with the book. So this book came out last year. It's for those who haven't been following the series, is by Yanis Varoufakis, who is a economics teacher who, I think, was it 2000? What year was it? I don't remember the year, but at some point he was brought on into the world of politics, and now he is an active politician in the sense that he has created a political party called, it's a hard name, but it's the IEM 25. I don't know what each letter means, but that's the name. It's like Democratic something, or I don't know, but that's not the point of the book. At no point is that ever mentioned. But this book specifically is essentially a message to Yanis's father. Yanis basically spent the entire book trying to answer a question that his father gave him when his father first had or got access to the internet through a personal computer. And he asked if it would be the internet which would finally cause capitalism to die, essentially. And Yanis spends the entire book trying to answer that. And as he tries to answer that, he basically shows that, hey, yes, but not the way that he would have wanted to. Yes, the internet did technically kill capitalism, but what came from it, what rose from its death was not socialism, but rather a much more predatory and a much worse system called technofeudalism. And it's a very interesting book. And at the end, I'll actually say what I think in general, but let's now actually get into, for example, discussing why the name techno-feudalism, why this name. He puts the idea, or he talks about that there could have been many names they could have given it. You could have given it a hyper-capitalism or cloud capitalism, or, you could have given it many names, but it would not be correct, because capitalism is called capitalism because of what it is, and because when the name capitalism came about, it needed to be a clear distinction from the system that was then feudalism. And now it's basically the same process, the same thought process. He's putting down the idea that, hey, look, we need a new name because the system is not like capitalism. Primarily, and the main reason why he goes back to the feudalism name, in this case, the techno-feudalism, is because it is a much more like feudalism than capitalism is. Because capitalism fundamentally, of course, has capital, as a important part of its existence, but its main objective is to generate profit, is to generate wealth through the selling of that capital and then accumulating wealth. However, with techno-feudalism, that is no longer the case. The main way to make money is not through simply selling and collecting profit. It is rather to do it through the means of rent. And he, in many ways, draws a very close parallel to how feudalism worked. For example, he talks about the cloud fiefs. During the feudal times, you had the fiefdoms. You had basically these parts of land, these kingdoms. You have the kingdom, and then you have the fiefdoms, the areas that were owned by the feudal lords, who were basically given to the agricultures, the farmers. That's a better way to explain it. And they gave it to them and said, all right, you can cultivate, potatoes, let's say, and you can work on my land. You can, generate your own supply of food. But then at the end of each month or season or whatever it may be, they brought in a sheriff and said, go collect a certain percentage of that food created by the farmers, so as a rent. And Yanis is saying, and in many ways, and I agree with him, and what Yanis is explaining is that, hey, look, now it's the same thing. Instead of having fiefdoms, you have the cloud fiefs, which is, for example, Amazon.com, where you have these, not farmers this time, but you have these capitalists, or as he puts it, the vassal capitalists, who basically act in the same way. They produce something. They are the owners of a business, for example. The business, has workers, of course. These workers produce the goods, and then these goods are sold through a cloud fiefdom, in this case through Amazon. Amazon takes a percentage, a cut, a rent, and the capitalists, the vassals, then get the rest. And then from there on, it's basically capitalism as usual. But even now, the capitalists are at the mercy of the cloud capital owners, because this is one of the bigger definitions to why he gives it that, now we're under a new sort of reign, is because before we were under the reign of terrestrial capital, or as we typically know, the traditional form of capital, and now we are under the reign of cloud capital, a new form of capital, a sort of digital capital. This digital capital does have a physical form, as data centers, servers, as the infrastructures, the algorithms, the et cetera, et cetera. But then the cloud capital itself, it's the data, the information, all these different things. And basically, those who own that type of capital nowadays are the ones on the top of the food chain, like Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg or the several companies in China like Tencent, for example. And so the Yanis calls these, instead of capitalists or cloud capitalists, they call them the cloudalists. For some reason, I have a tendency to call them the technofeudalists, which I guess could make sense too. I don't know, but it's the cloudalists. So before I go into explaining other terms, which I will in a sec, let's define or try to explain why all of these changes came along. Of course, the best way for you to know how these things came along is to listen to the whole series, of course. But this is just a summary of what I gathered and what I think is the more important things about this book. So, with the 2008 crash, a financial crash, there was basically an entire cesspool of dumbassery. Sorry for my language there, of things that happened which should not have happened. For example, which is what Yanis explains, is that there was seemingly a sort of socialism for the bankers and austerity for the public. Because the bankers, those who caused the crash of 2008, were basically met with, oh no, we must, with passion, basically, with not with passions, with empathy, and when basically, the people who lost millions and who caused, the entire global financial system to crash and made people lose their houses, their cars, et cetera, instead of being punished as somebody who basically committed a crime, essentially, and who did this horrible thing. No, quite the contrary. They were met with money, because with the bankers, the banks were also going to die. And whilst saving the banks through austerity, for those who don't know what austerity is basically when you tax the fuck out of people, sorry for my language, and when you basically use the money and the resources who should go to, for example, public services like education, welfare, healthcare, and a myriad of other things, go instead to help out banks and other private institutions. And not only did that happen, they also financed, and not financed, but also saved the bankers. And one of the ways that this happened, and one of the ways that they tried to basically fix the economy, which again, Yanis does a much better job at explaining this, was that the central banks, instead of doing their job and trying to actually, solve problems adequately, they simply printed more money. With this new money that was printed, instead of it being used for the original intent, let's say, which was injecting more money into the economy and basically trying to revive capitalism from its, collapse in 2008, people simply took that money and invested it into new sectors, into, in this case, into technology, into big tech. With that, we invested tremendously in big tech, and suddenly big tech was immensely large and had a power which was incomprehensible for most of us, and to most of us it still is. A lot of people don't exactly understand how powerful tech companies are nowadays, and that's a tremendous oversimplification of what happened after 2008. And again, I suggest that you listen to the other episodes to get a better understanding of what happened. But what Yanis is saying is that in 2008, it was basically the death of capitalism and the birth of technofeudalism. With that in mind, we then can start going into, all right, with techno-feudalism having been achieved, or with the birth of techno-feudalism, we then must talk about how does techno-feudalism work. I already talked a bit about it with the cloud thieves and the vassal capitalists, but there are others. There are other people who are part of this economy. We then have, for example, the cloud serfs and the cloud proles. So, for example, who are the cloud serfs? The cloud serfs is the day-to-day person, the person who wakes up, looks at their phone, gives a few likes on some posts, then goes to work, uses a GPS, and consistently throughout the day uses their phone, uses apps who collect data, who use that data, who is then sold to people who want that data. And also that data is used primarily by the same companies who gave you that GPS, who gave you that social media platform, et cetera, to change your behavior, through marketing methods, to drive you to buy other products. And the more of this data, the cloud capital, which you as a cloud serf produce for this company, the more powerful they become, because the more rich they are, the more cloud capital have, the more power they have in general, because it then becomes this weird sort of fake currency which they can use to trade with each other. And cloud capital suddenly has this tremendous power. And you as a regular person, somebody who has no say in what is happening, is producing wealth. And this is something very interesting, because it's the first time in history where somebody is making unpaid or doing unpaid work without even knowing that they're doing work, right? Without even knowing that they're producing capital, right? Like with slavery, you were producing something, you were producing goods and you weren't being paid. In this case, you are producing capital, producing cloud capital, but you get nothing for it. You're just a person. So those are the cloud serfs. Then you have the cloud proles. Who is a cloud prole? A cloud prole, for example, is somebody who works at a Amazon factory or Amazon warehouse. These are the people who work directly for the cloud thieves and who physically allow the cloud thieves to, be maintained. And usually these people are run not by other people, but by the cloud thief in this very dystopian form. Let's look at Amazon, for example. It's the example which Yanis gives many times, and I think truly the most horrendous example possible. Horrendous not in the sense that it's a bad example, but an example of a bad thing, which is that Amazon workers are overworked as hell. They have like completely unreasonable timetables to follow, and something which is so, we had like the pee bottle thing, right, where they had to pee in bottles to be able to stay on track with the deliveries. And since these systems which track how much you work, where you are at every moment, how long you take to go to the bathroom, et cetera, are all controlled by AIs. The same AI which is then, the same algorithms who are then controlling the cloud thieves, the same AIs who are For example, in an Amazon Alexa, these are the same fundamental systems, the same systems which are, keeping Amazon afloat, are all contributing for one company's wealth, Amazon, or one cloud thief's wealth. And that is the fundamental aspect of technofeudalism, is all these people working together, quote unquote, to serve the interest of one group, a new social class, a new class, which is the cloudalists. And in the book, Yanis talks a lot about a lot of interesting things. He, for example, touches upon Elon Musk and him buying Twitter. And there's a lot of different things that are interesting about this book. And in generally, I had never really been presented such a full picture of the current world and the current world we live in, which made so much sense. And I do agree. I do agree that to call what we have today capitalism isn't exactly correct, because the fundamental structures and systems and the whole concept of how capitalism works is no longer in action. And when I say no longer in action, I mean that it's not the main the driving force, because capitalism in a sense still exists. Of course, there's the vassal capitalists. So yes, capitalism in a sense is still alive, but they are not the dominant. It's not the dominant system anymore. We are no longer serving the capitalists, but rather a lot of us are serving the capitalists, but then the capitalists themselves are now serving a new, higher class, which is, again, the cloudalists. And there's another very interesting topic which Yanis talks about, which is the new Cold War, which is the Cold War between the United States and China, and that it all stems from basically through the fight through cloud capital, and that China in the last few years has made a tremendous has had a tremendous amount of evolution regarding their technological infrastructures, and because of the different or more centralized form of organization that China has, it has completely changed the way that China's technofeudalism works. And in fact, Yanis even calls it technofeudalism with Chinese traits, or Chinese something like that. Because, for example, as I said before, I talked about Tencent, which is this massive company in China, which owns so many different types of content. It owns Riot Games, the creators of League of Legends, for example, and it owns all these different companies. And they have completely revolutionized the way that they work with cloud tech and with technofeudalism. And so America saw this as a threat, because as technofeudalism becomes stronger and stronger, and economies are more dependent on the cloud thieves, and China is developing a bunch of cloud thieves which are way less. First of all, they're a lot less dollar dependent, which is a big aspect of it, but they are also more streamlined, because they aren't as slow as the American systems, and also because of the difference that in America you have Silicon Valley, which is the central of the techno-feudalism of the cloudless, and then you then have the banks. You have Wall Street. It basically, you have these two separate entities which can't really mix. And in the case of China, that doesn't exist. There is no Silicon Valley and the Wall Street, because they are one and the same. And the banking systems that China has made around the cloud and these instant transactions and all these things or much more efficient and much more appealing to the vassal capitalists and to the other to the businessmen of the world than the American alternative. And America basically saw China become too powerful in that sense. And with the invasion of Ukraine, when Russia was hit with tremendous sanctions, Russia then turned to China for to help them through with their imports and exports. And when China basically accepted, and suddenly Russia came out, seemingly is stronger than it was before the invasion. When America wanted the exact opposite, they wanted to cripple the Russian economy, and that didn't really seem to have happened. There was suddenly this moment of, okay, China is much more capable than we thought before. And then, of course, there was for example, the Huawei thing, which had to do with attacking the cloud, the cloud thieves of China. And there was the recent TikTok ban, or the trying to, and I think it was today, the day that I'm recording this, that they passed a bill that has to do with basically, if TikTok isn't sold by its current owners, that America can ban it, something along those lines. Basically, they're trying to close off America and trying to cripple the Chinese cloud thieves, but they're doing it through the classic American ways, and the ways that they have done to every, the methods that they've used to every other country throughout their reign as the global hegemony. The issue is that they're not working, because China is not any other country right now. It is a country which actually, I think, right now is considered more economically superior to the United States of America. And so China doesn't really care, and they're just like, all right, sure, whatever, we'll do our thing. And for example, Huawei, didn't die because they were banned from the US. They basically came up with a alternative to Android, because that was something that they couldn't use anymore, or didn't have access to directly, because of they couldn't work with Google and other stuff like that. And so there's clearly a sort of new Cold War, because again, it's like the original Cold War, but this time it's, instead of being between the United States and Russia, it's between the United States and China. And just as the Cold War, it never actually escalated to direct armed conflict. It was simply done through espionage and these ridiculous dick measuring contests, basically. And it's basically what's happening now too. But Yanis does a much better job at explaining it. So again, I suggest you go check out the episode that I read that, which was episode 6, I think. I might be incorrect about that, but it's in the title. So go try to find that if you're interested about that part. Other than that, there's not much that I would like to talk about other than the ending of the book, where Yanis talks about his other book. This was in the last episode, which was episode 7. So it's a much more fresh topic, I guess. But Yanis talks about another book that he wrote, which is called Another an Hour, which is a sci-fi novel, where it's a book where basically it takes place in 2 parallel universes, our own and a parallel universe where after 2008, the sort of actions that we took to solve the crash, the financial crash, was different. And it basically allowed us to create, instead of techno-feudalism, it created techno-democracy, a form of socialism rather than a form of capitalism, quote unquote, with techno-feudalism, or an evolution of capitalism. So what in this parallel universe, basically capitalism died and a form of socialism rose instead of a new form of system regarding capital, which is technofeudalism. And so he talks about it, and he fundamentally talks about why he wrote that book, and then in merely 20 pages explains some fundamental aspects about the other system called techno-democracy and how it worked, and how he, for example, wants to democratize the workplace, money, the way to organize countries and towns and et cetera, et cetera. And there was something which stuck with me, which is right in the beginning of that section of the last chapter, which was the idea of, for example, separating a company into like their financial parts, into splitting them into 4 parts, and then those parts are, their percentages are chosen democratically by the workers. This would be basically every company in this system is a cooperative, which means that there is no one boss. Every worker owns 1 share, which gives them 1 vote. That share cannot be sold or bought. As long as you're a worker, you have it. And there's a bunch of these different systems, and that part in particular I very much enjoyed, because it also made me very hyped to read another now, to learn more about them. But they're definitely interesting, because I've always had questions regarding centralized versus decentralized economies. Of course, there's always the idea of a planned economy, which I think a planned economy is always better than the supposed free market. I'm a Marxist, so of course I do. But the reality is that I've always had questions regarding a centralized economy versus a decentralized economy. And that last chapter talked a lot about essentially a decentralized economy, or decentralized economies in plural, which then together formed one larger economy. And that really made me feel more confident about decentralized forms of economy, from a person which actually knows economic theory, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to give a vote of confidence and say that Yanis probably knows what the hell he's talking about, and that I don't in comparison. I mean, I'm sure that I'm more knowledgeable than, your local drunken man at the bar who spends at least 10 hours a day there talking with his buddies. But, comparing to somebody who's studied economics academically, I know nothing. I know as much as a brick wall. But it was very interesting. It's very interesting. I created Politdigm, so I'm always, of course, interested in economic ideas and ways to organize, companies, and the best way to do it, or the most fair way to do it, which doesn't fall down the pitfalls of capitalism. Because how could I, have created Politdigm? How could I read all these books and share these Marxist values, but then go ahead and be the owner and the runner of a capitalist organization? That would be the most hypocritical thing possible to do. And so I very much enjoy that last part. I would say that that's probably my favorite part of the book, was that last part, because it felt so tangible, so possible, and less like a story or a retelling of a story or an analysis of the present, but rather a goal to achieve. And that captivated me. That gave me a feeling of, ooh, all right, now I'm hyped. But yeah, generally speaking, I very much love this book, and I think that if everybody has stuck around to the end of the video here, I think that if anything, this video should not serve per se as a good representation of the book, or that you should not watch the entire series and only watch this video and go, all right, this serves as a good way for me to know what this book is about. But no, this surprisingly enough, this last episode, if this is the first episode you're watching, this should serve as a motivator for you to watch the series, and not just for my sake or for the sake of Politdigm, but purely because I think that it's a very important book for people to read, because it, again, is evaluating and analyzing our current world, and is saying that it's wrong, and explaining why in excruciating detail, and explaining all these systems and all these structures that are in place. And for the Marxist, for those who like Yanis, or like the mere mortal that I am, want to create a more egalitarian world, et cetera, it is very important to essentially be up to date with the newest Marxist theory. And this book, having come out of, well, not exactly true what I'm about to say, but having read the Communist Manifesto right before this, even though I've read other books in between, finishing this book and having finished the Communist Manifesto, it's very interesting because the ending, and it's done on purpose, feels very much like a spiritual successor to the Communist Manifesto. And I think that the reason that is because of the last paragraph, which is only 2 sentences, which is cloud serfs, cloud proles, and cloud vassals of the world unite. We have nothing to lose but our mind chains. And that is a clear throwback and a sort of, I would call it an Easter egg, but it's definitely linked to the Communist Manifesto. And if the Communist Manifesto was basically a manifesto, to bring together a group of people against a system which was capitalism, this very much feels like the same thing, but instead of being against capitalism, it is against technofeudalism. And that is why I'd say I recommend this book so much, is because it gives you a clear understanding that our entire world is, I have no other way to say it, but fucked. Our world is fucked, and and there's a lot of things wrong with it, and there's a lot of things which need to be fixed. And for those things to be fixed, you have to have an understanding of what is currently wrong. And this book does an amazing job at that. And that is why I recommend you either read it, which I'd say is the thing you should do. And if you don't want to buy the book, or if you don't like reading, then yeah, I guess you have a second option, which is either to listen to me reading it, or just search up a audiobook that is online and listen to it. Again, I'm not going to say that you have to specifically watch our content, but regardless if you want to do it or not, I still recommend that you read this book, and that you consume its content in whatever means that you find, or in which way you choose to. And I'd say that is the last message I want to leave, other than, this was a great book, and I personally very much enjoyed it. And I was a little sad that I guess I ended it. It was the longest book I've ever read. I've not read many books in my life. You probably can tell from the quality of me reading, but it is what it is. I try my best to make the best content I can, but this book was great. It took me a while to finish, but now I'm also very excited to move on to other books, and specifically start reading some more classics, like the Communist Manifesto. And the book that I chose to start reading first, and I've already finished reading, is Socialism, Utopian and Scientific. It is a book by Friedrich Engels, and it's a book that I very much enjoyed reading. It's a awesome book. It's relatively short, but it's a great book which talks a lot about utopian ideas of achieving socialism, and then the scientific form of achieving socialism, which goes into dialectics and historical materialism, which is the name of the last 2 chapters, 2 of 3 chapters, actually. That's a little teaser for the next series. After that series, I'm not sure which one, what I'm going to be reading next, but I have an option between 3 books, so I'll let you know how that goes. But yeah, with that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video and in general this series. I apologize if this video wasn't, I guess, a great representation of the book, but I tried my best. I did a little bit of homework before this video, and yet I still feel like I wasn't able to do any, that I was able to do true justice to it and to Yanis's work. So I guess I apologize for that, even though I guess I didn't really do anything wrong, or I don't know. Just read it. Read the book. Trust me, you'll enjoy it. But yeah, if you enjoyed this book, and I've noticed that everybody has been enjoying this series, and I'm very happy with that part. Make sure to support us. Again, you can support us through Patreon. You can support us over at our website by checking out our alternative supporting ways. I don't know. I never know what to call them. I call them the collaborative roles that you can have with Politdigm. And join our Discord server, follow us on social media. And yeah, with Politdigm, we want to create a nice community of people who are passionate about politics and who are passionate about creating a more just and peaceful world for everybody. And so, yeah, I hope that you, whoever you are, can be part of that vision that we have over at Politdigm. With that being said, I'll see you all next week with the next series of Politdigm Reads. Goodbye, everybody.